Great. It's great to see everyone. We have missed you. So yeah, let's just go right into that question. So it's been a couple weeks. You've had some time with this stuff. I'd love to hear some insights, some examples, things that might have come up. I'm just going to turn it over to you guys for a sec.
Well, I'll start. I went to a conference. It was a CNO Academy. And I went last year, and we had done Strength Finder prior to that. And they talked about it a little bit. And then this year was interesting going back because now with the Talent to Strengths training, we didn't talk about Strength Finders, but as people were talking either about the issue they were having or something, I was able to think, okay, they're in a rut over this, or you're trying to figure out, like, what is their thinking process, and they're relating and those types of things. So it was, and I kept wanting to say, in fact, in a couple of the group sessions that I was in, I was talking about, I was pulling in Strength Finders and talking about how that could be used to resolve conflicts or things like that. So that was interesting. And then we had a session on influence, and I don't have any. I think influence is like my bottom 5, but so I learned a few little tricks with influence that were helpful as well.
Very good. Yeah. So just you do influence. You just don't have what Gallup has now come to call the influencing themes. But you absolutely have influence, because I think everybody in the room is afraid of you. So,
you know what? Once again,
That's funny.
You may remember a few weeks ago when we had a meeting and Heather was there, Tricia was there, and I was there, and we had a wife physician that runs the practice, which always works well, there. And she was saying, like, woo and communication and everything I had, like, I'm throwing it at the wall and, like, nothing is sticking. And Patricia, she did, like, I don't know, connected with this woman. And we talk about, I don't know why she connects with crazy people, but it worked. And so we've got some resolution on that today. And
good.
What I think is the next phase of that loop. And once again, Patricia saved the day. So she wasn't upset this time, so it wasn't as painful. But
it's taken a lot of smoothing to get there.
Yeah, like, she needed to feel, as I'm thinking about it, like, what I could have done different. Like, she just needed to feel heard. And empathy being 34 for me or whatever, I don't want to hear it. But you did a great job. Like, yeoman's work, whatever that means. Positive ways. So you did yeoman's work.
That's great. And a great example of influence doesn't have to be about, talking or, convincing somebody else. Influence could just be letting someone release the exhaust inside. And so listening can be more influential, often is more influential than speaking. So, but sometimes it's speaking to influence. Sometimes it's listening. Sometimes it's layers. Sometimes you think, you can get an oil tanker to just turn around on this, but you got to kind of let incremental turns. And so you have to come at something a couple times, like maybe it took a couple conversations with this individual to first get that exhaust out there. Then they can't blame you guys for not listening, or, then she has to start confronting maybe some other concerns and thinking about them differently. And then she has time to adjust to those new, ways of thinking. And so, it sometimes happens in sections to kind of influence somebody. That one fell swoop of, like, influence all at one time, I think it's kind of a myth, or it's rare. It's not the status quo. Influence really does take a couple of shots at something.
Well, and I would also like to speak to your point, Patricia, where you said that, you were able to pick up a few tips. And I think that that's important to kind of consider is that you can learn some of these qualities. And, you know, in that context, your intellection was like, okay, I can do that. I got this. I can apply that here. Your analytical was also probably participating in that. And so I do think that as you learn more about the body of kind of qualities, and you know, if you want to shore up or deepen a skill set in these qualities, you can absolutely apply your themes to do that in the way that works for you. So, I mean, I've done that quite a bit with learner and intellection and domains that I didn't have any real experience in, or I felt kind of like, okay, I need to build up that skill set because it is important to my work. And I'm not going to do it the way that somebody with empathy has, you know, I'm not, but I can still develop those qualities. And actually talking to somebody high in those qualities and sort of asking them and listening to them why they do what they do often can unlock that a little bit.
That's great. I want to add too, I'm just having this insight now, is that we think influence is what we do. We influence other people. And I want to shift a little bit to say that influence isn't on you so much. It's in the other person. So if I look at Patricia's top 5, how I would get her to see something or think about something I'd want her to think about would be very different than how I might have Pam, you know, with these themes, empathy and woo. I mean, I think I could be more, you know, talk more in the realm of emotions and, you know, strategies and plans. Whereas with Patricia, I'd want to talk more in terms of concrete data and clarity, you know, and intellectual rigor, you know, so if I have one style of influencing, it might work on one person, but not the other. And so when you look at someone's themes, it unlocks the keys, you know, or it's like they're the combo and you're the key, and it kind of tells you what the tumbler is for that person to unlock influence with them.
Yes, and I absolutely agree. And I think that one important thing that I say pretty regularly, if you have a meeting with somebody else, if it's, you know, peer-to-peer or supervisor to direct report, take a look at the themes. Just take a minute to look at the themes before you go in and just kind of reorient. Okay, you know, you'll start to really find some keywords and some common ground there. It just takes a minute, but it usually just helps that rapport, and just exactly what Adam said. It boosts the potential to influence.
I do want to hear from more people too about maybe any insights you had, but real quick on this point, this is why I like, for example, when I email with people at Gallup, because everyone at Gallup will have their top 5 themes in their signature, and it makes me stop to think, oh, am I communicating to this person's themes because they're right there? So that's why I like, you know, the email signature as with the themes as being, if you guys are going to be really serious about creating a strengths-based organization all throughout, maybe consider that as a protocol, you know, have your themes on there. Again, you may not, but just something to consider.
Yeah, anyone else like to share?
So I think I experienced a rut in my belief theme with my kids. So my daycare closed and I'm trying to find people to keep them. Well, my sister-in-law has kept them, and she's a very relaxed, let them do what they want and give them what they ask for kind of person. And I realized I had very strong belief in how I raise my children. So I got very angry the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in a rut. This is totally, I'm recognizing that this is where I am. I don't know what to do about it, but.
Well, I love it because I think it was last time we were talking about how you weren't feeling super connected to that theme. And I do think that sometimes when stuff bumps up against the theme, especially belief, but all of them, it's when you really start to see like, oh, wow, that is really that is deep in me, you know? And that's a great example.
I think the pot brownie what sent you over there. The hot brownies that really pushed you.
I would like to share with you, we're really excited that this week we have a new, what we call these are chibis. And basically we make these about each theme. So the one that we just put up recently was about belief. So you won't, I mean, I'm not going to read it to you now. Heather, I did just send you now the link to it.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah, but I think everybody on the team should learn how belief operates. And we just love doing these. We're having a lot of fun with these.
How many do y'all have done already?
6?
We're up to belief. We're working on command. These are, I'm like, so want these to go faster, but they just.
So you like,
I love that.
is this a local cartoonist you guys work with?
It's just me when I just feel like doodling on a napkin. It's just this art just flows from me, just effortlessly. No, I'm just kidding. Nellie is our graphic designer and our teammate. She's in Mexico.
She's wonderful. She designed the icons as well, and really is responsible for how just fun these are.
That's really nice.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Very good.
Y'all add cool stuff. Don't be afraid. I mean, we don't be spammed to death, but like send them like, hey, check this link out. Like if you do that kind of stuff, a lot more people will use your stuff. Because I'm like, that's really cool, but you know the way my brain works? I'm like, what do we have for dinner? And I love it. And I'm all into this. Like we're all sitting here because I love this, and I will like forget to do it, and I will come across it one day and look at it. You know what I mean? Like it's one of the. Don't be afraid to send us cool links because we enjoy your stuff.
That's a great.
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is an example where Felinda and I are aware of our strengths and weaknesses. And so social media or like constant communication, you know, we're going to need help with that. So we'll bring in a teammate, you know, or something to help us with that more, because our strength is, I think, designing the content, and we get so excited about it, we forget to tell anybody what we're doing.
I did finally this week, though, set up the subscribe. Like it was a process and a half. But you can now subscribe to that blog where a lot of that stuff is going to show up. So that is possible. You will get an email when new stuff comes out. So if you want to do that, I would love it, because I'd love to see that, the work getting that ready.
Go to your website, find that thing, subscribe to it, and then I can be told about it.
Yes, I know. I'll send you an email. We'll try to send you an email, but yes.
We will send you an email.
Very non-committal, Felinda. We'll send you. We'll try to. You know what? I might. I don't know.
I can't promise something that I don't absolutely know I'm going to do. So and I know that's like that activity is a weakness for me.
Okay.
Felinda's motto in life is under promise, under deliver. I'm kidding. That's my motto. I'm sharing it with her. Good. Other insights you guys have had, just either personal reflections. I know it's been a couple weeks, so we're trying to get those gears turning. But yeah, any other insights about your themes and about either in the workplace, at home, in your head?
No, it's just funny to see it. I mean, because you asked for an example, I'll give you one. Like the positivity letter this morning.
Oh yeah.
That letter, they had a letter drafted. You haven't gotten told yet. You drafted a letter letting the doctors know what we're taking away from them, and we're moving them all to Mondays to anesthesia. Well, that's a really crappy message. And I was thinking it would be much more fun. This is a positive way I'm telling you. I was
Nice.
But like what you do is you say like, hey, good news, we've made more room on the schedule, and we've made the following changes that are going to help you. And like, that's just way happier.
Definitely.
Yeah, it is.
I'll tell it in a positive way.
It wasn't a bad letter, by the way.
It really wasn't.
But I was like, what I was thinking about was that when the doctors get a letter from a hospital, unless they're talking about a new building or something, which is super rare, usually it's like, we're letting you know of our new registration process, or we're letting you know of a new form you need to use, or that you need to arrive 15 minutes for your case, or that we're docking you, or that's what hospitals send letters out saying. And this was like a great chance to brag. And then Heather suggested adding in like we're adding an MRI and we're adding a CT. All the things we're doing. Like, you got so many cool things happening down
Like
there.
a positive newsletter from the imaging department.
Oh, add about the calendar to that newsletter.
Oh, we're gonna add that to it.
No, I'm just.
We should.
Just yeah.
Anyway, it's just fun. Our teams all work together. Somebody else's thing that actually would get around to writing a letter did that. I'm impressed. So, you know.
I love it. That's like a great example of how you guys worked together and utilized it. And that's interesting because we are going to do your icebreaker that you had suggested about the time the themes caused a problem. And you had even said like spending time crafting a letter sometimes you felt like was a rut. However, this is a perfect example of when it's not. So that it's worth that time. It's worth that effort. That was just to emphasize my point.
Nice. Nice. Well done.
It's in your house now.
We work in a corporate headquarters. We're at the international compound of Talent to Strength.
It's totally soundproof.
It's nice in that high rise how you can have your windows that open and blow the breeze in at them. That's really nice.
And my bedroom is here too. It's amazing.
Spend too much time at work.
Any other insights that people would like to share? Why don't
No, I've been trying to think. Not really.
well, if it comes up, well, the next one is one that Nick was suggesting we use when we get to ruts, and we are here. And so I do want to ask, did anyone have a chance to fill out their ruts worksheet and nuance worksheet?
I did.
Did some of it.
I did some.
Okay, if we have some, we have enough to talk about, so that's great. So we're going to talk first, though. This was Nick's idea of name a time in your life where a theme caused a problem, and it doesn't have to be like this massive thing. It can be something where it's like some realization you had, you know, like how Heather had the realization around belief. So yeah, so I'd love to hear some examples of a time.
Heather Tucker, why don't you start us off?
All right, so with my responsibility, I tend to want to take on more than I know that I can chew. So I think that it takes away from my time to get my own personal stuff done, but I also don't deliver as well as I could had I managed the time better. So that's a challenge.
It scares me that someone as amazingly like together as you said a comment about like wish you managed your time better. Like it frightens me.
I know. How
Like,
much better could it be?
I'm like, holy crap.
But that's a great example of how that theme has a super high standard for that process of managing time well.
I also believe the developer side, when you turn it in on yourself, actually does make you say, I could do everything I could do better. You like it's hard for you to be satisfied.
Oh yeah, I'm very hard on myself as far as accomplishments. Did I do it the best that I could do? What could I do differently?
Yep.
Well, I think too with that, for instance, yesterday we have our LDI workshop scheduled for tomorrow, and we were meeting yesterday and to go over everything, to finalize everything, and to kind of just run through, kind of do like a dry run. And Heather didn't get to attend that because her child got sick, so she had to leave. And I thought she was going to have a panic attack when she left, because she's like, "Will you call me on your way home and tell me if anything's changed, because I need to know." And I'm like, it'll be fine, you know. So, and I didn't call her, but it was that responsibility of making sure that.
I felt so bad for leaving. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And
Have we talked about earned guilt versus unearned guilt?
No.
I think this is a really powerful point, especially for responsibility, because I think people with responsibility feel guilt in excess of other people. And if you stop and think about it, like there's some things that, you know what, you should feel guilty for. Like, oh, you said you were going to do something and you didn't do it. But I'm going to guess that doesn't happen very often. And if you do mess up, you're going to more than make up for it. But a lot of the guilt you feel, I think, is unearned, but it feels the same. You know, earned guilt and unearned guilt, if you don't think about this, which one is which, it'll feel the same. And I think if you just practiced, you know, is this earned guilt or unearned guilt? And then you can help dissolve some of that unearned guilt. Does that make sense?
Yes. I even wrote down I take responsibility for things that are not my responsibility.
Right. That's unearned guilt.
That's perfect.
Was that part of your RUTS worksheet?
Yep.
Yep.
Great.
And that is such a classic one for responsibility. And I do think the relief of that, it does lift quite a weight from responsibility.
Did you do other ruts, Heather? Did you kind of talk through your other themes and list for each theme what it looks like when it's a rut?
So for learner, I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes that can delay the actual end result we're trying to get to because I need to understand it. I always say I'm a big picture person. I need to see why we're doing this, and then from there. And I think it delays things sometimes. If I don't fully understand it, then I'll either not be able to move forward, or I'll go, if I can't get what I need from one person, I'll go find another person that can get it to me.
I was just thinking, like, because I have communication, I love to tell the why. I think everybody wants to know the why, even if they don't. And I'm thinking, like, that works out great, because there's never been a time where you've delayed anything or missed anything. I don't even know what the hell you're talking about, but it's perfect. It's perfect.
Good.
And then I did for developers, sometimes I try to develop people that don't want to be developed.
I put that same thing down.
And I have to make it stop.
Well, that's a really important one for developer, and a really important realization, because that potential, if it's draining you and it's not leading, you know, it's like people don't want to be developed, or maybe this just isn't really going to happen, even though you can see the potential, they cannot, or they don't want to for whatever reason. And learning that difference, or just being kind of like clearer on that, will help you not waste your energies, so that you can actually work where the sort of the soil is, you know, rich and ready.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm wondering too, like, if you could build in a step where it's like, assess the person's desire to be developed, and even engage in a conversation that says, hey, is this something you want to work on? And is this something you'd like my help working on? Because I think this could be great for your growth. And I enjoy helping people grow if that would be of interest.
Right. And I think that's what I lack, is the ability to ask, do you want help with this, or can I help you move forward with this? It's more of just conversation, and I'm just including it into conversation, and then I realize, okay, I just need to stop.
Well, it's not just you, and it's not just that theme. It's all of us. All of our themes are implied in our heads. We know what we want. You know, we know what we're angling toward. I'm angling toward developing people. But wait a minute. How would that person know that that's what's in my head unless I make it transparent? And so a question that someone asked me once was, help me see what you see. Because I would just communicate. I would throw emails. I call it throwing it over the wall. Like, I didn't want to deal with something, but I have an idea, and I throw my ideas over the wall to other people because I don't know what to do with them, and I'm hoping that they take the hint and develop it more. And why would they take that hint? And so Terry is her name. She would say, Adam, she used to argue with me and be like, that's a dumb idea. I don't see it, or whatever. Now she'll say, help me see what you see. And then it makes me communicate those inward assumptions that I make. I love developing people. That's where I'm coming from. And I didn't think to tell you that. You might hear it as criticism, but no, I'm actually someone who takes an interest in other people's progress. And so it's my way of like making a contribution if you're interested or if it would help.
I'd actually love to hear from some of the other people with Developer. Did you have a different thing that you flagged as a rut? Does that feel also like what you had?
Who are our developers?
Sherry and Pam.
Sherry and Pam.
I basically said the same thing, that I see things in people that they may not want to move towards. So basically the same thing, but I think my strategic also adds to that, because not only do I see the potential in them, but then I see the shortened path that I want to develop them into. And so those two sometimes conflict because they don't want to go that way. They'd rather take the long path.
That's so true. So that actually is going to tie into a thing. I hope we get to it today, but triggering discretionary effort will really be something I think the developers in the room will enjoy. But we will hope. I think we'll get to that. So let's. Anyone else want to share about the RUTS worksheet? Or no?
Go ahead. I was gonna say I'll do mine, but it's with my 5. It's the ruts all tend to lead to the same spot, which is probably not a good thing. So it's just a really deep rut is what it is. But I also realized, this was a good exercise because I realized by writing out, I think because of maybe my age and my experience, is that even though I wasn't able to name these, now I can name them, and I can see how over time I've automatically adjusted and compensated to get myself out of those ruts, even though I wasn't calling it that. So, overall, the last question is, so overall I tend to be very judgmental, which I know is not a good trait. I recognize it in myself. And then I tend to isolate myself, so it's like I just get fed up with everybody and I'll just go do it by myself. So,
yeah.
So all 5 of those kind of stick me in that deep ditch, but in the analytical. And again, I can think of some examples like here at work in meetings or whatever, where I became too aggressive on, I want proof, or that doesn't sound like it's true. And then I kind of tend to just skip over. I don't care how anybody's feelings, what their emotions are. I just want the facts. And then on deliberative, sometimes I'm slow to act because I'm compelled almost to think in a linear fashion, but I know that kind of hangs me up. So, people may see me as stubborn. So sometimes I actually have to just tell myself, it's not important, forget it, move on. And that's how I get myself past that. And again, if I'm working in a chaotic, disorderly situation, I get very stressed, and then I tend to start cleaning everything because it makes me feel better.
Oh, you're not alone with that one on discipline.
So I tell everybody, look, if you see me scrubbing the cabinets, just leave me alone. And then with the intellection, I tend to just live inside my own head, and it isolates me, and then I tend to shun the people of other company. And sometimes I don't like idle chit chat, but I know that that's important. So I'll, just force myself to be in situations where I can, there's nothing important going on right now. Just relax and enjoy the moment. And then the achiever. I think with all of that, I do tend to get I take on way too much, and then I just burn out. So I'm just trying to achieve that balance.
Yeah, that's great and really well articulated. I think you're so right about that observation, that sort of lifelong observation of like the sort of natural abilities you've had to kind of already catch and correct that. And one of the techniques that I encourage is to really think, spend some time thinking on this. What did you do? It could be an action, a thought, to think back to an example of a time, situation that something happened where that felt like it was happening. This is for everyone, not just you. I want everyone to do this. And what were the steps that you took to kind of catch and correct and get out of that pattern? And you'll see a pattern over time. Now that we've brought it into a little bit more of a kind of like clarity space where we're really inspecting it and sort of dissecting it, it'll be easier, I think, to catch and correct, which is where we're going to go with the ruts, into nuance. So like, we want you to spend that time in the thriving. We absolutely recognize that these themes can get you into this space when you recognize those behaviors or those feelings or those actions, and you're like, okay, I'm in the rut of X, Y, and Z, and here's why. You'll reach for your tools to get out of that rut faster. Or you'll use the nuance of like, all right, it's not time for this. Let me just shift gears. So I think that's, one of the reasons we spend so much time with this. It's one of the reasons everyone gravitates towards this section, because, it's our pain points. We want to get out of them. We don't want to spend the time here, but we need tools to do that. And I do think really thinking back over your life and being like, well, I was feeling that, but this really got me out of it and moved me along, can help quite a bit.
Can we talk about Uber Rut real quick? This box down here.
I didn't do that one.
So this box down here is what where we'd like you to take a stab at looking at the rut of each of your themes and seeing if it leads to an overarching rut. So, just looking at Pat's, like when she's in maybe an overarching rut, it's about too much inside her head, and that, processing analytically and deliberative and intellection and this need for order and process. So when she's in a rut, I would imagine it looks like her office is, not the way she wants it in order, or, she doesn't have inner clarity. And so she's not able to feel at her best. And so maybe her mind gets a little cluttered, or just maybe too concrete when something should be more of a more amorphous kind of thing, or a more nebulous kind of situation where there aren't concrete answers and there is no guaranteed way to avoid failure and there is no way to predict and avoid chaos. So, those could be, sorry, my slides moved. Those could be things that lead to an overarching rut. For me, I'll just use me as an example. My themes lead me to have way too many thoughts and ideas and information and knowledge, and then too little bandwidth for me to get all of those ideas out into the world. So this limited bandwidth always makes me feel like I'm never successful enough, or I'm never doing enough because I know all the possibilities I want to do, but it's this bandwidth that just can't accommodate all of that. So that's my Uber rut. And then the idea from there is to look for strategies to either decrease the demand in my case, or increase my capacity. And that's how I would manage when they say manage your weaknesses at Gallup. That's what it would look like. I'm not going to change myself, but I can manage my Uber rut better. That's what we're trying to help people see. And one last thing, one of the best things to help us manage our ruts is other people. It's just hard to do for yourself and see yourself objectively. And when you're with a team who support you and they know you and they value you, when they say, hey, Adam, chill out on the ideation for now, I know they're probably right. Probably. Maybe not. I'm just kidding.
think one of the things you'll start to recognize as you work together in this context is if you do catch each other in the rut or you see your colleague, it's just sometimes very natural to offer support in a way that's like, oh, this is easy for me. Let me help you in this way. You can help me in this way. I mean, it's just this really, it almost becomes very fluid. And that result of that support can really bolster the morale and that sort of engaged energy of a team.
That's great.
That was just another example there. So I, spend a little more time if you haven't had a chance to fully fill this out. These aren't supposed to be like hard and fast. They're just supposed to get you thinking and kind of really working with the material so that you do get some application. And writing stuff out by hand makes us pay attention to it. So.
And a little tip, if you're using this with other people, let other people tell you their ruts before you comment on them. If I did this in a group setting with my team, for example, I'd maybe start off and I'd share my ruts to model transparency and all of that. And then I'd let other people talk about their ruts, but I wouldn't necessarily jump right in there to talk about it because, it's people are sensitive about opening up to those things. But then if they could just do it without penalty, and then we realize everybody's human and these aren't great secrets that like, oh, I already knew this stuff about you or whatever. But now that I know that you know about it, now I know that we can maybe talk about it or work on it together. It's not a taboo topic.
Fair enough.
So let's move on. Did anybody have a chance to fill out the nuance worksheet? We actually want to develop this further. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. But this is where we go. So in our coin model, we've connected, we've observed, interrupt is ruts. So you're kind of looking at the patterns and seeing how you might interrupt them. But with the themes, they're always going to be on. So you can try to turn the volume down, but it will never turn off. So just, the nuance is more like that volume switch where the ruts, you're like, okay, this is when, I'd like to turn the volume all the way down and off, but it's just not going to happen. So we've spent some time in the interrupt with the ruts. And now we're going to move into the nuance. So that more like a volume control, like, okay, well, it's not going to turn off, but maybe I can dial it down for this situation and bring it back up for this one, or call on, well, maybe it's not such a great match with this particular person for developer, let's say. Like maybe I'm over developing and I'm catching that, and so I'll dial developer down and I'll bring up something else like adaptability maybe, or strategic you can call on. I'm using Pam's themes or woo. There are other things you can dial up if you're dialing one down based on the situation you're facing. And so we want you to have that skill and that ability to do that and to help others do that. So the nuance is very situational. So I'll just say that. Where the ruts and the enablers, they're more like, okay, let me think back over my life and the patterns of my life. The nuance is very much about the immediate situation. What is the match for right now? What is it time for now? So I'd like you kind of this week going forward to be thinking about that in the context of your themes, in the context of all the work you've done so far, saying like, okay, freeze frame, I'm catching myself in this situation. If it's Nick writing an email, is this an email that I really do need to spend time on, that my communication and my woo and positivity can really bolster the overall, experience. And so, yes, my time is spent, very productively here versus like a very short communication where that situation would be like, well, no, my time spending 45 minutes on that email is not spent super productively. Let me dial that down and move on to something more fruitful. So that's that's a very simple, kind of specific thing, but it is situational. And so you'll have a lot of chances, if you think of it in that context, to catch and correct or enhance.
I wanted to ask you on the nuance piece, where it says you dial this back. It was confusing because it says high. Is it supposed to be high?
So I want to explain that when Felinda said we want to improve this, that is one of the things that's not clear. So the idea, the flow of this would be, what's a situation where, your themes might get in the way? I probably should rephrase that. And then what did you observe that told you your theme was maybe not a match? Now, if you were to just interrupt that theme, what value would that cause? Just interrupting the theme alone, what would that create value in the situation? Because if the theme is a mismatch. So just turn off the ideation for me or something like that, or the intellection. Just try to get out of my head and be present, which is, would apply to strategic too. Get out of my head and be present in the moment. Well, that's what interrupting would look like. And then, now that I've interrupted my theme or mentally imagined interrupting it, what would it look like if I dialed it back up all the way to kind of get that contrast, and then to go, yeah, all the way off is not really needed, but all the way high is not really needed. And so the idea here was to kind of get you to think about it, and then to go, all right, well, then let me dial it a little somewhere in between all the way off and all the way full blast. But we'll rework this. I think it could be more clear. So I want to point out that your communication theme is right on. It's not entirely clear.
Well, and I if it's okay, Heather, I'll use your example. And you don't have to say if this is accurate or not, but okay, you're faced with a situation where this is more relational. It's like your sister-in-law has very, very different style with, caretaking. And so that situation is real, and it is in front of you, and it is showing you some things about your belief theme. And so, you're observing that, right? And so it's kind of like, all right, what do I do with that material now that I know? And that's the space where you can say, all right, if this is temporary, can I just, it's not going to go away. So that's the thing I want to make very, very clear about the ruts. You cannot just say oh, I don't want to feel this, or I don't want to think about this. It's not real. So you have to find another way around it. And so when you interrupt it, it's like, all right, could it be that this is just temporary and something relationally I don't need to address, and therefore, yes, I'm okay to be uncomfortable temporarily, or it's a little bit longer than temporary, and no, this is absolutely important. I need to address it, and here's why. And then you would move into the nuance of all right, well, I could express some of this with my belief, explain to the sister-in-law about the belief theme and how that functions, or, nuance it in such a way that it does meet the need of that theme. And that's so important for the nuance, is that you cannot really deny the needs of your themes and the way they show up for you, but you can adjust how you are in that situation. So that would just be a relational situation where Nick's was more of a process situation.
Yeah, and I think at that point I was so angry I finally just told her exactly how I felt.
Which maybe that's what it called for. So that's
at the end of the day, she was like, I promise you, she has not had a pacifier all day long. We told her that Mama had to throw it away. I'm like, oh great, I'm the bad guy now. I would have, looking back to develop myself, I would have not gotten that angry, even though this is an issue that's happened in the past. But what could I have done to not get to that point, to still get the end result that I got? That was my thought process.
Yes, and that's where the nuance comes in.
Right.
And that's where recognizing when you're feeling, so ruts don't usually start at 100. Ruts usually start somewhere and build and build and build until, if it's not addressed, it's an explosion, or it's just an extreme version, right? We have all been there. So, the process of recognizing those patterns, you will catch them when it's kindling. And you can address kindling a lot easier than you can address a full-blown fire. So, and you can also start to recognize what's important about that kindling, because we're in, just as humans, we are very much about kind of like not wanting to engage in confrontation unless you have command, and then it's fun. But then, we tend to kind of put off our addressing our needs or sort of looking at them of like, okay, how are the ways that I can ask for what I need? Because we're like, it feels too small, or it's this or that. And maybe that's true, but it is important, I think, to recognize those patterns because they are important to us. And we will see, I've seen it in my life, and I want you all to have this too. It's like I catch certain things where it's like things used to get just great on my intellection to the point where I'd be like, exactly what Patricia said, I'd be like, enough of you, everybody, I'm out. And now I try very much to be like recognizing that kind of coming up and saying like, all right, I'd either step back or, I just try to address that a little earlier without the anger and the emotion present. So I want that for you all. And that's where the nuance really can come in and be a very productive application of really taking time to look at the ruts.
Yeah, and all of this is really about managing ourselves. And then as we move into the next phase of this is about how do we develop other people as well. So first it's self-awareness, knowing myself, and then managing myself. And I think the same is for your team members. That's really what you're trying to do with your reports, the people who report to you. Wouldn't it be great if they could manage themselves? Well, in order to manage themselves, they need to be aware of themselves. And that's why the StrengthsFinder tool is so valuable and why the talent to strength process is really about moving that forward and implementing it. So we kind of actually want to start moving into that now with just managing our time a little bit. Sound good?
Yeah, that's great. So what we're going to talk about now, so we've talked in the context of COIN, and we are going to keep coming back to that model. It's very fundamental to the way you carry someone through, yourself and others. But now we're going to talk about, and Adam is mainly going to take this piece of the discretionary effort. So this is when we really get into, triggering this in others.
Yeah, that's kind of where we want to go. Is now, we've given you a lot of time to think through and understand StrengthsFinder and how it affects you. And in this team environment, I just loved how this is working out where you guys can observe each other and share feedback. And now we want to begin turning our minds toward the rest of the organization and how can we harness this. And one of the real and powerful benefits of this is that when people play to their strengths and people do what they do best, they're more likely to be engaged. And there's all sorts of benefits that come from engagement. Lower turnover, higher customers or patient satisfaction, and just on and on. There's so many benefits of when somebody's engaged. It's basically saying if you could have everybody in your organization either be the worst version of themselves down here, actively disengaged, which 18% of the global workforce is actively disengaged, or you have them be a bland version of themselves where they're not engaged, which is 52%, and then versus their best version of themselves where they're engaged. And one of the best benefits of someone being engaged is something called discretionary effort. And just imagine, just think of it this way. If, you as managers and executives, you can demand obligatory effort. It's part of the contract. It's like, if you want to work here, you better do these things and you better not do those things. And you're obligated to do that. Otherwise, we have measures for correcting that and ultimately terminating you. So, there's that. But what you can't do is you can't make somebody give you their discretionary effort, which is this level of effort that we all have. When we really care about something, we give it our best. We go the extra mile. We're not focused on, will I get rewarded for this or not? We do it because we feel engaged and invested in the process. And so we want as much discretionary effort as possible. How do we get it? You guys want it. We all want it. Discretionary effort is this great benefit. And the only thing is that we can't force people to give it to us. So how do we get it?
Discretionary effort. Okay, so you've talked about that before. I think it's perfectly. I mean, it's honestly, it's the easiest. You know, we've used words like it or, you know, minimum expectation, and you've given us, you put words to that. So like Patricia was saying, the Strengths Finder gives you that. That's the difference in somebody that like works here, and that works their way out of here.
Very good. Very good. Anybody else? Other thoughts? How do we get discretionary effort? How would I get your, how does your discretionary effort work? What causes you to release that discretionary effort?
I think it's buy-in. I think if you're around the people that have that same drive and inspiration or whatever, it makes you get on that train. You know, I'm working towards that same goal.
Also, if the situation is a match for you, I feel like you will naturally just do more.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all great. Yes.
Yeah, very good. So, just getting back into this a little bit, it works the same way for everyone else too. I want to be part of a team. I want to be valued for who I am as a person. I want the freedom to give that discretionary effort. I don't want to be guilted into it or tricked into it or bullied into it. And so there's something that helps describe this. It's a theory called self-determination theory. It's a theory of motivation, human motivation, and it's gained a lot of traction over the last 10 years. And I really like it too. I love this idea of self-determination. It kind of conjures the idea of freedom. This is one of the roots of the word freedom is translates from Latin to self-determination. I want to determine for myself where I go and how I get there and all of that. So there's three things that triggers self-determination. And the first one is autonomy. I have a sense of choice to give more. So the minute like I'm doing something, let's say if you have kids and they're doing something good, you know, they're cleaning their room, and then you walked in there and said, "You better be cleaning your room." That's right. You know, I mean, you've taken away the autonomy. So when you can give autonomy, maybe give them choice on how to do it. Maybe you don't give them a choice to do it, but you give them a choice on how to do it. You talk with them about it and engage them on it, you know, why it needs to be done and see what their thoughts are. And so it's really about autonomy. That's really important. So how can we trigger that with our people? That's one thing. The second thing, and this one probably relates most to StrengthsFinder, is competence. What really makes me want to give discretionary effort is when I am personally growing and I can succeed. I feel like I could really do well on this. It's within my abilities, and I could grow. I can even stretch my abilities. And so that's competence. And how can we trigger competence? Well, we set people up to play to the things that they already have, you know, some talent for, or some knowledge around, or some skills for, and then we help them scaffold up and build their competence. So that's really important. If I know that I can't succeed, or no matter what I do, you're going to yell at me and it's never going to be good enough, then it kind of saps my own, you know, desire to participate. So it undermines my autonomy, and then it also makes me feel like I can't succeed. And the third one, I don't know why they call it relatedness. They could just call it relationship, but it really comes down to, do I care about the people who would benefit from me doing this? Even if I don't have the choice to do it, and even if I'm not good at it, if I care about the people, I'm going to do my darndest anyway to make sure I come through for them. So this is why that sense of team is really important. So any thoughts or questions on discretionary effort, self-determination theory?
Well, I like the autonomy because one of Maslow's first hierarchy of needs is autonomy versus shame and doubt. And I think that if you don't give them that autonomy, then they're never going to get to the competence and relatedness.
Yep. And so that's why when we hear the term micromanaging, you know, like that's almost the antithesis of autonomy. Very good. Other thoughts?
I did want to ask you, is that, I'm sure it is somewhere, like, it's not in there? Okay, I couldn't find that presentation, and I didn't know where it was. I love that slide, particularly.
Oh, right.
Oh, we can definitely put that slide in. I'll make a note.
Oh, wow. Now she's committing to things.
This I can do.
Now also write down to send him a note to a link to sign up for our letter or whatever it is. Or blog notifications. Good. All right. Great. We'll get that to you. Okay. This is a really important concept because if you can harness this, you're going to see your people behaving as the best versions of themselves. And so, you know, it takes a little bit to develop with this, especially if you're transitioning from let's say you're a manager and you have all new team members and they don't really know what they're doing. You don't want to really give them autonomy just yet. You want to develop them and get them the foundational knowledge and build them towards autonomy. And then you could focus on other things instead of micromanaging people. By the way, we use this philosophy in our youth program. So we want everything to be intrinsic motivation as much as possible. We want the students to want to do it. We do not want to have to play the role of authoritarian. Authority is our last resort. I use leadership because I think leadership is what can evoke discretionary effort. Authority is what evokes obligatory effort. So there's a difference between authority and leadership, and it's a very important difference that I don't think enough people talk about. I think they just confuse them. They just lump them together, you know, treat them like the same thing. Authority and leadership, they're separate. Authority comes with your position and your title and your role. Leadership is something that comes from your social force. It's something from within you. And we have another course on that. But that we think that's a really vital difference. Sometimes you need to rely on authority, and you should. And the proper use of authority is absolutely critical in organizations. But all the time we see people who don't use their authority. We'll see managers who, when there's a dispute among their team members, the manager will say something like, well, you guys work it out on your own. Have you ever had that or seen that? Mm-hmm. And what you just said is you guys use interpersonal politics to decide who's going to out-bully the other person or who's going to be the first one to kind of, you know, back off. And it's not a good use of authority. So there's important, vital uses of authority. And then there's also where you don't want to use authority, you want to generate leadership.
And I'd just like to jump in, Adam, if we could just move to that next slide, because, you know, a lot of this comes down to those three things and to using your leadership to inspire others. And it goes back to the models, you know, this is where the StrengthsFinder ties in, the work that you've been working on. You know, the thriving and the fans on three, it's all very, very closely intertwined. Yeah, I'm looking at our time, and I want to be sensitive to everybody's, you know, time constraints today. So we are coming up at our hour. Do we want to continue on, or do we need to keep it at an hour today?
I don't mind continuing to go, but if y'all need to wrap it up, what are y'all thinking? Y'all good? A few more minutes? I mean, it's good information.
hate to not get the benefit of this. We're all here.
So what I would say then, yeah, we'll take a few more minutes, but what I would say there based on this slide is, if let's say you have your lowest performer, let's say you have somebody who's a fan on one, they do the bare minimum, and they're not really intrinsically motivated, they're not giving you the discretionary effort that you'd like to see. I would start by assuming that they would want to, but that there's something stuck in their fan. And I think we talked about that before, the toothpick or the pencil or the hockey stick. Yeah. So I would want to find out first, maybe their engine just doesn't go past one. Maybe their motor just, all they can do is one. And there's some people that way. Then they might not be a good fit. But somebody might, they might be a fan on three just waiting, but they just need to be managed a certain way, and you haven't found a way to speak their language, and or maybe there's something stuck in their fan. Maybe it's you, maybe you're the pencil in their fan, or maybe it's something else, and you need to find out. Maybe they're not doing what they want to do, or they aren't feeling like they're competent at what they're supposed to do, and you might want to help liberate them, help them find what they are passionate about or where their strengths do lie. Maybe it's within the job, maybe it's somewhere else within the organization, or maybe it's outside into another place, another organization, or another thing for them, and they need to be liberated that way. So, and then as you do, you might find out, ask them, why are you suffering? What is going on in the job that makes you not like it? And just have that conversation and try to help them to get more aligned, move them more towards alignment, and then you get the benefit of their fans on three.
Yeah, and always kind of referring, when you're facing a situation where you're like, okay, I want to trigger more discretionary effort, just refer back to those three areas, because something inside one of those areas is something you could reach into and pull out or identify very quickly usually. And then you can get to kind of the methods of how to address it. And that is something I do want to say, we can stay on this point, but I do want to say we're going to use the POM that we did and start we're diving into the methods of how you'd like to apply this material so that you have a more direct application based on these sort of global concepts. So that is what's to come. So I do want you to be kind of thinking about that and thinking about how we can apply, and even just within your own team members, that as you sort of look at them, is there discretionary effort already triggered? Is it already where you'd like it to be? And start just kind of thinking about, okay, yes, great, awesome, how can I keep it there? And if not, what might be inside those three areas for that particular team member? So that's something to kind of do this week as well.
Yep. Yeah, I would think about, does this person have choice over their work? And if they had more choice, what would they do differently? You might ask them, you might find out, now that you've been in this role for 6 months, what do you think works? What do you think could work better? Competence, what are the skills? Or even if you're observing them, you could see where they have areas of competence and compliment them on it. And then later you might need to correct them on maybe an area of performance that isn't working quite right. And then relatedness. Are you doing stuff to help build rapport among the team members where they like each other and care about each other? Or do you have a team where there's conflict in there and you haven't there's conflict, but you don't know how to resolve it and you didn't want to meddle with it, and maybe that conflict is just kind of under the surface and maybe affecting things. And then, when you resolve that conflict, you're setting a tone for the kind of culture you want to have in your area. All right, before we move on, any thoughts or questions to anything Felinda said or anything on these slides? Because I think this gets to the heart of managing and unleashing greater value from your human resources. And so I think it's really important stuff. So do we want to move into the coin model then, Felinda?
Well, before we do that, I want to just kind of go over the homework and what's sort of to come, because I did want to check in with everybody. So what we think the next few sessions will look like is the homework for this week would be to do the thinking that we've talked about, but also to watch the strength thinking video. The link is in the Kajabi. Strength thinking will start to get into some of that one-on-one coaching and how to apply that. And then, so we'll be talking about that and some more about the coin model next time, but then we're going to get into sequencing, which is what we were talking about a little bit around, the recruitment, the selecting, hiring processes, onboarding, and developing. That's where we're going to get into some of those methods. All of those steps are important to the strength-based organization. Then we're going to get into some strength-based teams and then pulling it all together. So I do want to ask or put it out to the group, and you don't have to answer this instant. Is there anything that we're leaving out that you'd like to see added in, or anything that is there removed in favor of some other content?
And we have how many more sessions left?
I believe we have 4 right now.
Okay. Good. Yeah, so this is our way of trying to make sure, like in the 4 sessions we have left, that we're giving you kind of really what you need to kind of begin building more of a strengths-based organization, assuming that's where you want to go. I think also I want to say part of this course was for all of you to kind of experience these ideas and see if you embrace them and want to really, you think there'd be benefit to having them be more a part of the organization. So, and that's part of it too.
By the way, I'm modeling autonomy here.
Nice. I don't know, and if y'all disagree, say so. And I like where you're going, and I think we need to think big organization. One thing that I struggle with a little bit is when it's time to sit down with somebody for the first time and kind of go over. You talk about that in some of the videos, and maybe it's better to like have us rely on that. But like at a certain point, I wouldn't mind you kind of talking through with us sort of the prep that goes into that. I mean, it could be a matter of we go print off a worksheet, but I don't know. I wanted your thoughts on it.
Great. Yeah. Go ahead, Felinda.
Well, that is a question I have for you guys. Do you feel like you're going to be doing like a team onboarding process with this, or more of the one-on-one where you'd like to take individuals through sort of during their, personal development meetings with you? So, do you envision more of an individual kind of coaching or a team coaching where you take people through this?
I think that we would start team, but then go individual. Y'all are very experienced, and y'all can disagree too. Y'all, the people I'm pointing at on the TV, point at the camera. I think it's probably easier to do a team if you have experience. We are still kind of learning it, and I don't want to sit down with someone and like read them their strengths like that or themes, or it just seems amateur to me. And so I don't know, like how do you do it? What's your favorite go-to worksheet that you have in front of them, and like those kinds of things that kind of get you started and start a dialogue, and the questions you would ask them.
This is a great question. Yeah. But do you have any thoughts first?
Well, I do, because I think there is some prep work that goes into that, and you will find yourself becoming if you do 1 or 2, you're going to feel like you very quickly are like, oh, I got this. I mean, you can always come back to me and ask me for help if that's not the case, and even if it is. But I do think that's a great point, because there is some very specific prep that goes into that. And a lot of it is kind of the way we use the coin model. I will do that with an individual, a team, or a large group, which you guys aren't really going to do, so we don't have to worry about that part. But there is a slightly different kind of prep that goes into that. So yeah, we'll make a note, because I think, and it might be great if we do some practice runs.
Yeah, so to me, what makes this so fun, because I think that's what gets people, is it's kind of fun, and then they start realizing it's not just fun, it's really useful, is that you feel a connection. And I worry in a big group that they're going to be like, yeah, got it, sure, okay. You know, when I've seen it done, go back to the first time I saw Adam do it, to, you know, what I've seen done with his team, like when we went to the Tremont Hotel and things, Adam, like, you know, it's you have time in a group of 8 people to say, you have this and you have this, do you find that? I worry in a group of 20-something people that everyone's kind of waiting for their themes to be mentioned. And
it's true. And I think I personally vastly prefer this kind of setting and one-on-one, because I really do feel you can get into the material and actually make it useful for people. Those big things, they're useful in their way, but exactly that, you don't get to that uniqueness that's possible with this tool. And that's something that is exactly what we're talking about today. It's like, if you go to your team members and you're like, take this assessment, that does not give them a sense of autonomy, and there can be a little bit of resistance around, like, well, why are you wanting me to do this? And so that's part of the prep. And so one of the things I want you to all consider, if this has triggered your discretionary effort around this work, what was the moment that happened? It's different for everybody usually. Sometimes it's actually having a realization about the rut. Sometimes it's like with the enablers. Sometimes it's a particular part of the model. Sometimes it's just taking the themes and reading it, but that is rare. I actually think I know one person who took the assessment, jumped right in, and started using it with his whole team and stuff. Usually it takes more about that communication and building that rapport of like, well, this was really meaningful for me because of this, and be really specific, inspire them and get them excited about it as much as possible first. That's absolutely critical, because otherwise it's just going to feel like, you want me to do what? You know? But yeah, I agree. I think the smaller the groups and the more time you can spend on it, I have found personally, I prefer, like, if you're going to do it with a team, great, maybe do like an introduction, but then try to like break it up over time, just like we've done here, where you can spend some time with the stuff, and you can, you know, that you can get a chance for those conversations to start building inside day to day.
Yeah, it seems like the small group, I'm going to say less than 10, is the idea. It's better than like one person, because one, you can definitely talk about yours, but I've learned so much about everybody in here, you know what I mean? It's like, you see now, you're like, you're right, it's totally how they do that. And it just, and then you can learn your 5 if it's individual, but you don't learn anybody else's, and that's a whole separate vector. And it's hard to describe the others if you aren't telling them. And even driving, because I listen to this driving, and so I have to try to remember, like when you're doing the 34 themes, I try to remember, like, who's that one? Because once I know who it is, I can like picture them, like, yep. But when you're describing it, it's kind of hard to back into their personality.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the way that I learned this was just attaching people I knew well, like the way they did it, and if there was enough of a pattern. So I could read all the stuff and I remembered it, sure, but it wasn't until I did that where it really started to be like, oh, that's how that interacts. And it's the interaction between the themes. So like how we often will talk about, oh yes, we are isolating, developer. We did that today where we isolated developer, but those 4 other themes really are in there too. So that takes some practice, and absolutely does take learning how it shows up for people.
I want just a couple of thoughts too on this. One is, the first thing is, do you believe in this tool? And is it something you think is worth the time to work with on your staff? That's one of the purposes of this course with all of you, is so that you could have a chance to consider that. So we want you to, you know, and if you're like, yeah, this really does give some direction, and I think it will be worth the investment of time or money for the codes or whatever. So that's the first thing. If you don't believe in it, don't even bother. I would say don't do it. Focus on things you really do value or believe in. The next thing would be, if let's say you do believe in it and you think it would be valuable, clarify your purpose for why you would do this. And I think I might even want to ask you all to take a stab at doing this individually and then sharing your thoughts with each other. So first, do a POM for how you would do this with your team. Why would I do this with my team? That's purpose. I mean, we can almost just pull up, let's share the screen real quick. The slide here, you know, what is the purpose for you, why you would do this with your team? What outcomes would you be looking for as a result that would tell you, yeah, we're on track for why I wanted to do this. This is producing those results. And then the methods, because that's what we've been talking about, methods. Should I do it one-on-one? Should I do it with a group? What should I do? You know, those are all methods. Those come after you know your outcomes you want. But generally speaking, you know, I don't mind talking about methods first. I would say one is, just as Felinda was saying, share your own results at one of the meetings you have coming up. Just make it a little byproduct and say, hey, you know, or just one little, I don't know why I said byproduct, one little bullet point in your meeting and say, hey guys, I want to spend a few minutes talking about me. You know, people laugh and then be like, yeah, no, seriously, I went through the StrengthsFinder stuff. I thought it was really unique. I want to share my results. Do you guys think this sounds like me? Here's what I'm learning about myself. And so I find that to be really useful. And then just leave it there. And then see if somebody comes up to you afterwards and says, you know, I've taken StrengthsFinder, or I'd like to take StrengthsFinder. The next meeting, come back and say, guys, you know, just to follow up, several of you said you were interested. If I bought you codes, would you all be interested in taking this? You know, and again, going back to one of the very first things we talked about today, if you're trying to influence people, don't try to do it all at one time. You know, do it little by little to kind of move them in the direction you want to go. Those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I almost think this is because we've talked about like employment stuff, and I almost think this tool is really, I don't want to say only, but it's only seems truly useful once you said it's most useful when you know them, because it explains the why, I think, of how they're ticking. It certainly can help you craft a message to them, what they're not going to want to hear maybe, but it just seems like like when we did the mid-manager review, we had this sitting out. We were like, this is what's going on with this person. You know, that's why they're doing that. It helped make sense of sort of the chaos and got through personalities, like what they're difficult or they're this or they're that. And it allowed us to kind of have insight into, or make excuses for them, I'm not sure which yet, but to understand maybe what's causing them to tick that way.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and then like if you get their buy-in and you kind of they all take it, then just in your meetings, just weave in a little bit of time each month or each week or whatever on this. You know, have them, you know, give them their top 5 diagrams, because you'll have a document generator account to make those diagrams with the 5 images on it. Just talk about that one meeting. The next meeting, share with them the theme anatomy. You know, but Felinda and I will talk about this and come in with more of a proposed game plan. But I'd like you to think about it too. Like, do you want to do this with your team? Why? And what outcomes would you want to get from it?
I think, I mean, for me, speaking for myself, I definitely want to do this with my team. And I've kind of just organically, because I didn't know that what I was doing was right, but it sounds like it was. After we did it, started talking about like what I was learning about myself and just trying to explain to them a little bit more about me and like why I do certain things and what kind of drives me or whatever. And then we've been just kind of talking about more things that we learned from in here as it relates to the team. We talked about fans on 1, fans on 3, but so then it got me really energized, and my team was really energized to want to take the test or the quiz, whatever it's called. So they took it, and now I don't know how to go deeper with each person. And we do talk about it. We talk about the different things in our meetings briefly, and we touch on things, but I haven't gone in depth with each of them because I don't know, like, I think that's what you're saying, how to approach that. And I think for me, I'm probably going to do it one-on-one or in a very small group versus the big team stuff, because even tomorrow in our LDI, we have a big, like a very high level overview. I think your activities stand up with you always. So that's a lot of people's first taste, I guess, of what their themes are. But then after that, I mean, because I meet with my team every single week, and pretty much every single week something about this will come up, but I don't feel like I've gone in depth enough with some of them to develop some of these ideas. That was a really well, I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly what I think you're going to face, you're facing. So I would suggest, and like Adam said, we're going to get into more detail with this, but the way that I find it usually works, and what's lovely about strength-based organization, is you're not just trying to do this like massive information dump, you're letting it grow over time. So I would suggest, actually, if you're going to do it with a team, setting, or even an individual, I do it the exact same way. I actually set aside, with a team, I tell people to set aside a particular amount of time and do that for as long as it takes you to get through the COIN model. Have them do the worksheets, because there's a lot of, as you see, a lot of discussion and kind of like personal engagement with the discussion around the worksheets. And then I would just do one at a time. It's like that 1 week you do raw talent, and the next week you do connect, and maybe you spend 2 weeks on connect, and the next week you do observe. It's very structured in the beginning. And then you get them all the way through mature talent so that everybody has the same really foundational piece. And like I said, you can do this one-on-one too. If you meet with somebody weekly, you can set aside part of that meeting to take them through that segment. I actually, when I'm doing individual coaching, I will have my laptop open and I will show them the visuals, and I will say, here's the model and here's the worksheet. Here's what we're going to do. And you're going to bring this back to me. And then once you're through the mature talent with that, nice foundation, you can build on it from there. So you can dive deeper into some of those points. You can get, pull the theme anatomy back out. You can pull out some of these other, models and theories that we talk about, and it can all apply back to that foundation piece of like, okay, well, I have that orientation around my top 5. So that's the way I do it. We'll definitely provide more of the nuts and bolts, but I just usually like block everybody through that model.
Yeah, so it sounds like we need to kind of figure out what is going to be in our toolbox, the go-to tools, which of the worksheets were most meaningful for us that are going to connect with people at an early stage. And then I like the idea of just one at a time, because I struggle with that same thing. Beyond like, here are your themes, aren't you excited?
I like doing it as a small group though, because I've learned a lot about myself and other people, and what those, like for the ones that aren't in my top 5, like your examples that you give, it helps me to understand somebody else that might have that and how I need to talk to them or relate to them or whatever. But so I think there is a benefit in a group discussion. And it would be interesting to see, even as senior leadership, that we kind of look at, see like what are our strengths and then where do we want to go with those. I think we're already doing some of that, and then even do it with the management team, so there may be somebody who's very good at one thing, but somebody else would need that talent to help them with something, so they would know, okay, if I need to have this done, so I'm going to call that person because it's easy for them.
Good. I also want to make sure too to say, you don't have to know all the themes. You don't have to be conversant in all the themes at all. Like, use this as a discovery process for yourself. I only learned the themes when I knew somebody that had the theme, and then it became of interest for me to learn it. And then I learned right along with them. Even when I'm leading workshops, I'm like being paid by a client to lead workshops when I first started. I was learning the themes along with them. And so feel free to do that. Like, I think if any of you are expecting to have to be an expert in StrengthsFinder to begin engaging people thoughtfully about who are their best selves and how can we have more of your best self, you don't need to become an expert in StrengthsFinder. You can use this process with your team to grow with yourself, in yourself in this area.
I think as a new person to this, it helped being in a group because I couldn't identify. I'm like, what? But watching what Karen's were and her talking about that and being able to identify those made me more aware of what these talents are and how I could identify them in myself.
That's great. Also, Felinda and I are resources for you guys too. Like we want to be able to support you guys. So, bring questions or whatever. We're happy to. We grow from it as well.
And there's a lot of conversation in this work. So, asking questions. Well, how does that show up for you? Oh, interesting. You have, context. All right, that's number one. Like, after they have a little bit to go with, like the theme anatomy or the signature reports, and they've connected to it on some level, even if it's just that beginning space, getting them to talk about it, either in a group setting or individually, they will share how it shows up. And it might take some time to develop that rapport around it, but it usually doesn't, because people enjoy sharing about themselves. Even people that don't love to share, being understood and sort of feeling out how that has a name and is a positive thing, and it's like, oh, let me like look at this a little closer. It usually flows. Like, once you get going, the conversation, just by asking a few questions, it really, I find, just opens this up pretty easily and in a really fun way. You really will get to know people and that team dynamics in a way that I have found personally the most positive version that I've come across. It usually doesn't take much effort, which is something I enjoy about it too.
Yeah, so I'm just wearing my timekeeper hat. It is 3:30, so I think this might be a good place to cut here, as long as we all know what next steps are. I'm going to pick it up next week.
Sounds good.
Are we on for next week?
Yep.
Right.
Yep, it's nice to see everyone again.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good week. Email us with questions or call.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.